All right. So let us start. Welcome to the World Bank Tokyo Development Learning Center. Welcome to the forum titled Investing in Gender Equality for a More Resilient and Dynamic Asia Pacific, the Role of Multilateral Development Banks and Development Partners. My name is Koichi Omori. I am Senior External Affairs Officer of the World Bank based in Tokyo. I'm going to be acting a role of the timekeeper today to make sure that we can land together at 12 p.m. To complete the very rich programs today. So before starting and getting into the content, let me make a very few housekeeping announcements. We have a simultaneous interpretation today. For those of you in the room, we have receivers in the back in the room, so please grab one of them. For those of you joining virtually, on the bottom of your WebEx screen on the left side, I think there is a button that you can make a selection of the languages. So please make sure to pick up the languages. ここだけちょっと日本語で言いますが、今日は同時通訳を入れてございます。で、オンラインでご覧いただいている方は、WebEx の画面の下の左側に言語を選ぶところがあります。そこで英語あるいは日本語を選んでいただければと思います。Also, during the Q&A and discussion component, we would welcome everyone, including the virtual participants, to pose your questions and comments. For online participants, please put your comments in the Q&A sections. Whichever languages you would like to do, English or Japanese, so that we'll try to pick up during the conversations. オンラインでご覧いただいている方、Q&A セクションというのが WebEx の下の右側にありますので、そこに日本語でも英語でも結構です。ご質問、ポイントを書いていただければ、適宜ディスカッションの時にピックアップをいたします。Okay, so I would like to move on to the welcome and overview section of this today's seminar. First of all, I'd like to invite Mr. Takahiro Tsuda, Director of the Multilateral Development Banks Division of the Ministry of Finance of Japan, to give us the opening remarks. Tsuda-san, please come in. Please welcome Mr. Tsuda.
Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I should have said good afternoon, good evening too, because we see participants from online. It is a great honor to be here to give opening remarks on behalf of Japanese Ministry of Finance. As one of the co-hosts of this event, let me extend my sincere gratitude to everyone who are joining us today. Also, taking this opportunity, I'd like to thank the World Bank Gender Global Practice Team led by Hana, the ADB team, led by Sam, the IFC team, and the JICA colleagues and the MOF staff who worked tirelessly to prepare for this event. Gender equality and empowerment is no doubt a universal goal that all countries should pursue. Not only it is a basic human right, but also it is a critical ingredient to sustainable development and growth. It brings economic viability by securing equal opportunities in businesses, build resilience in the society, and protect the most vulnerable. Gender is a cross-cutting issue, having wider implications to different sectors, such as human capital, climate change, and access to finance, to name a few. However, it does not mean all the countries can achieve full gender equality now in a uniform format. Excuse me. We must be mindful that the differences in progress towards the gender equality could significantly differ from one country to another, depending on social norms, cultural backgrounds, history or education, etc., etc. A wide spectrum of gender equality and inequality that has been witnessed in this region reflects the underlying diversity of this region. The Asia and the Pacific region has the world's most populous countries on one hand and the small island countries on the other, fastest growing countries and very mature economies, and also with various institutional arrangements and the country systems. So even if we all agree where we are headed for, a transition path from the status quo to the ultimate goal must be well tailored to each country, each industry, and each sector. What does it mean? The two implications could emerge. One, helping countries in that transition is a very challenging task. Why? Because it requires in-depth understanding of each country's unique problems. And two, Because of this diversity, we have lots of things to learn from each other. Due to these reasons, I firmly believe multilateral development banks, such as World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, are uniquely positioned to render strongest support to developing countries because these institutions are fully equipped with country engagement and diagnostic tools, knowledge insights, and financial firepower. I'm sure that Elizabeth from the World Bank and Bruno from ADB will elaborate on these respective added values even further. Today, we are lucky to have excellent speakers, including experts from the World Bank, IFC, ADB, and JICA, executives from the private sector, high-level policymakers from the region, all of whom, I believe, will be willing to contribute to this important agenda. I'm confident that all of us, both physical and online participants, will learn a great deal in the following sessions. Before I conclude, I'd like to share with you one of my favorite topics in gender space, which is the role of men. Let me discuss on a kind of hypothetical country A, which happens to be very male-dominant society. And suppose you are tasked by the president of that country or prime minister, whoever it is, to mainstream gender equality. What would you do? While the female leaders' voices matter most, so you may want to first reach out to female leaders, correct, tick box, check box. However, I think it is critical to outreach men in the mainstream circle. I said this is still male-dominant society, so they're still in the mainstream circle, so that men can and should play a critical role, particularly during the realistic yet ambitious transition to gender equality. I believe it would not be fair if we simply ask female leaders to take full responsibility on whether gender equality could be achieved. This is a joint effort. Men should join force and support and take their part as well. So with that, congratulations, and I look forward to further discussion to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Taka. So next, I'd like to invite Elizabeth Hoyvens, who is the Director of the Strategy and Operations East Asia and Pacific regions on behalf of the World Bank, making the opening remarks from Washington. Elizabeth, please come in.
Thank you very, very much, Koichi, and thank you, Mr. Takatsuda, for such an inspiring opening, and welcome to all the participants, directors for MDBs, the Ministry of Finance for Japan, for your comments. And I want to thank the organizing team and really appreciate the collaboration among the Japanese Ministry of Finance, ADB, JICA, and the World Bank Group. As Mr. Takatsuda already highlighted, the East Asia and Pacific region has made significant progress towards gender equality over the past decades. And, you know, we can see that, for example, in the health area, where maternal mortality has improved from 121 to 74 maternal deaths per 100,000 live births in 20 years, and where in 2022, lower secondary school completion rates for girls was almost 97% and surpassed that for boys. Nonetheless, you know, there remains a lot to be done, as we know, and that's why we're here today. Women in the region are underrepresented in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. And that, of course, limits their access to high return employment opportunities. And while women's participation in the labor force in the region is relatively high, it is decreasing, and women's jobs are more vulnerable. Women's participation in the labor force remains considerably lower than that for men, And women also earn about 20 to 30% less than men for similar work. And in all economies in East Asia and the Pacific for which we have data, women spend more time than men on unpaid domestic and care work. Women are also more likely than men to be employed in informal, low wage, and vulnerable jobs. 43, almost 44% of women are in vulnerable employment compared to that compared to 39% for men, meaning that, you know, when there are shocks, they lose their employment more easily than men. Moreover, almost 3/4 of women are employed in sectors that are highly sensitive to climate change, like agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. For example, in Vietnam, women make up 45% of the agricultural workforce, and climate-related events like floods and droughts threaten their livelihoods and food security. Women also own less land, whether they are farmers or entrepreneurs. And because of that, their access to productive inputs is limited, adversely affecting their productivity. Women-owned SMEs are underserved by formal financial services, highlighting a significant gap in access to finance. In both public and private sectors, women are underrepresented in leadership positions and decision-making roles. And EAP also has some of the highest rates of gender-based violence in the world. By the time women are 19 years old, roughly 1 in 5 adolescent girls from East Asia and the Pacific who have been in a relationship will have been physically or sexually abused by a current or former partner. Gender-based violence has high economic costs, as we know, and lifelong consequences for women and girls. And for example, in PNG, our analytics finds that GBV reduces GDP by about 0.5% per year because of annual productivity losses for victims. And the World Bank, of course, like all the other partners who are present here today, is working to address gender equality challenges in East Asia and the Pacific through our policy dialogue, our analytics, and our investments. We are helping to strengthen GBV prevention and response systems, given its high prevalence in the region in several of our client countries. In Vietnam, for example, under the Ho Chi Minh City Development Policy Project, annual anti-sexual harassment training for bus drivers and conductors is mandated, setting a powerful precedent for safer public transportation. In Cambodia, we're partnering with UNFPA to geolocate GBV services and assess their quality so that we can understand the scale of service gaps. We are also supporting the countries of the region to develop childcare systems that can free up women's time to engage in paid work. In Vietnam, analytics and technical assistance influenced the 2019 labor code to include childcare services for factory workers. And in Cambodia and Indonesia, we have partnered with Japan to pilot childcare service delivery models. And we are supporting women's leadership and employment in non-traditional sectors. For example, we have a strong program that is called the Pacific Women in Power program, which is being implemented in collaboration with the Pacific Power Association and the Pacific Community. And it is an innovative initiative dedicated to enhancing women's roles in engineering, science, and leadership in the energy sector. Today's event is part of our effort to disseminate and operationalize the recently launched World Bank Group Gender Strategy for 2024 to 2030 and Hannah Brixey, who has led that effort, is with you. The strategy puts forward a very strong agenda to accelerate gender equality with 3 strategic objectives: to end gender-based violence and elevate human capital, to expand and enable economic opportunities, and to engage women as leaders. It calls for very ambitious gender equality results. The strategy is highly relevant for the East Asia and Pacific region as we tackle the remaining challenges in achieving gender equality. Over the course of today's event, you will be discussing these challenges as well as lessons learned and achievements in pursuit of further progress and practical solutions. I would really like to encourage you to go a step further and discuss not only what the issues are, but also the concrete actions that we can take after we leave this event, and particularly how we can work together, collaborate, and create synergies in our efforts to advance gender equality in Asia and the Pacific region. And I want to end by wishing all of you participants a productive deliberation and discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for your remarks. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Bruno Carrasco, the Director General of the Climate Change and Sustainable Development Department of the Asian Development Bank, to share his welcome and opening remarks. So let's listen to his video. Thank you.
Distinguished leaders from the Ministry of Finance, Japan, World Bank Group, and Japan International Cooperation Agency. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all. I'm sorry I cannot be there in person and will address you through this recorded message instead. Welcome to this pivotal event co-hosted by the Ministry of Finance, Japan, World Bank Group, JICA, and ADB. Today's event will explore how gender equality can address some of the most pressing challenges in our region, from combating climate change to advancing the care economy agenda, addressing labor market disparities. Gender equality is an integral and impactful approach to foster green, equitable, and inclusive development. At ADB, our longstanding commitment to promoting gender equality reflects our understanding that inclusive and sustainable development is unattainable without an intentional focus on closing gender gaps and promoting women's leadership and empowerment across all sectors. Our roadmap, ADB's Strategy 2030, identified accelerating gender equality as one of the 7 operational priorities, with an ambitious corporate target that by 2030, at least 75% of committed operations will be gender mainstreamed. I'm very proud to share that we have indeed significantly exceeded this target, reflecting the reality that attention to gender equality is core to ADB's DNA. It is for this reason that ADB's Board of Directors recently approved our new Corporate Results Framework 2025-2030, which raises the bar for gender equality, for further strengthening our methodology and intensifying our focus on ensuring that our operations have a deeper impact on women, girls, and the communities across the Asia and the Pacific region. Our discussion today will present numerous opportunities for impactful partnerships between multilateral development banks, development partners, and national governments. I am certain that conversations today will facilitate greater synergies and coordination across key partners to step up our collective efforts to ensure growth is inclusive and resilient, with gender equality as one of its driving forces. By working together, we can amplify our efforts to achieve meaningful and transformative gender equality results. On behalf of the Asian Development Bank, I would like to thank the Ministry of Finance, Japan, for its leadership in driving this gender equality agenda and organizing this event. And of course, for the World Bank Group and JICA for our ongoing strong collaboration and partnerships. Thank you for your kind attention. I wish you both a stimulating and insightful set of discussions. to all the participants over the course of this half day. Distinguished.
I was wondering he's going to speak again. Thank you, Bruno, for your opening remarks. So we have structured this interesting forum into four segments or sessions, actually. So let's start with the first session titled "The Focus on MDB Collaboration in the context of increased ambition on gender equality and the role of gender equality in addressing regional and global challenges." For this session, we have two panelists. Samantha Ham, who is the director of the Gender Equality Division, Asia Development Bank. I would like to welcome to be seated on the stage, probably in the other side. Also, we have Hannah Brixey, who is a global director of the gender of the World Bank. Please be seated also. And then moderator for this session is once again Mr. Takahiro Tsuda, director of the Multilateral Development Bank's division of the Ministry of Finance. Taka-san, I would like to toss the microphone to you. Please be seated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning once again, and thank you very much, Hannah, Sam, for joining this fireside chat. And we are so lucky to have two female leaders on gender front in MDB space. As Elizabeth and the group both mentioned, recently the two development organizations, World Bank Group and the ADB, have revamped the corporate strategy on gender equality. Obviously, I went to the Washington, D.C. to attend the World Bank IMF annual meetings. The launch of the Gender Strategy 2024 to 30 was obviously one of the greatest outcomes of the annual meetings. And also, it is very impressive that ADB just completed the midterm review of the Strategy 2030 to upgrade the commitment on the gender equality as corporate. So, I mean, I first would like to ask both of you to guide us through the recent development of corporate strategies and the policies of the two organizations on gender equality. I will first ask Hannah to share your experience, your insights, and then I'll ask Sam to share the ADB insights as well. So, Hannah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Taka. Let's start with the evidence. The evidence is very clear. For countries to end poverty and improve prosperity, they need to unleash the potential of women and of all people. And we see from evidence that, for example, just giving women the same employment opportunities as men have, the average income per capita would increase by 20%. We also see that gender equality improves education outcomes, health outcomes, nutrition, food security, and then when women participate in decision-making, outcomes improves, including, for example, disaster risk preparedness and management. So the evidence is very clear. So reflecting on the evidence for the World Bank Group now, it's really a historic moment to accelerate gender equality, engage with client countries to accelerate gender equality to end poverty on a livable planet. As Elizabeth mentioned, there are three key objectives in the strategy. The first is around the foundational well-being. So it is to end gender-based violence and elevate human capital. The second objective is around expanding and enabling economic opportunities. So for women to have equal access to productive jobs, for everyone to have equal access to productive jobs, to economic assets such as land, and also to enabling services such as childcare or other care services or safe transport or mobile internet. Now, it is also a historic moment for the World Bank Group to engage to make a difference. And we realize, drawing lessons from the past decades, that to make a difference, it requires a concerted action, using data, knowledge, and advocacy with partners. And Taka, I very much appreciated your opening remarks about the role of women and men and the need to engage men also in the solutions. We also now with the new strategy are engaging more fully, supporting countries in institutional and policy reforms toward gender equality, as well as programs at scale, and also to mobilize both private and public financing for gender equality. Our engagement is becoming more comprehensive. also supporting countries to integrate gender analysis in macro fiscal analysis as well as all sectoral analysis and policies, because we see that by integrating gender analysis in all these analyses, it becomes clearer what specific gender equality outcomes need to improve and which specific gender barriers need to be addressed to make progress. And finally, I would say that in East Asia, we already see very good results and excellent engagement. I would suggest the example of Vietnam or Papua New Guinea, where we are supporting the countries in comprehensive analysis, use of gender data to address gender-based violence, for example, in Vietnam, as Elizabeth mentioned, or another great example is in Vietnam is to expand access to education for deaf girls and boys. In PNG, the examples around engaging women in decision-making in transport sector has been very valuable, showing that actually with the increased participation of women in decision-making, the transport services have improved, or expanding access and use of financial services in PNGs and other great examples. Now, my final point is on the role of evidence. The fact that countries and the private sector, as well as us as international partners, can be more effective in making progress toward gender equalities thanks to recent evidence and increasing and continuing investments in evidence to make the case why gender equality is a key priority, how it contributes to other outcomes, as well as being, of course, an important outcome in its own right, but also what works to make progress. And I would like to recognize the partnerships that exist to actually generate this evidence and enable us collectively to build on the evidence for action.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and this has been a really great collaboration with World Bank Group as well as JICA and the Ministry of Finance Japan. So perhaps just to complement what Hannah said, I completely agree on the evidence. That is why organizations like multilateral banks like us, we put a focus on gender equality. And ADB has been on this journey for quite a long time. So maybe for the benefit of everyone in this room, I'll talk a little bit about what we had and what we just recently introduced. So for ADB, our current corporate strategy, which is actually this year, which is our strategy 2030, which was approved in 2019 and takes us to 2030, we put up there at that time accelerating gender equality as one of 7 thematic priorities across all of our operations. So we sort of halfway through, and it was at that time that as my Director General Bruno said, we put a target for 75% of all of our operations would address gender equality. So ADB is a little bit different in that we have one organization. So our private sector arm is one department within the organization. So we apply the same approach across the board, just that the modalities differ. So the 75% applied. So how we do that in practice is we've had a 4-tier categorization system since or a long time ago. Since before I joined ADB, which was like 15 years ago, it was already kind of in place, whereby we screen all our investments across 4 tiers. So that's how we count the 75%, because it's based on categorization of each project. So fast forward to where we are. I think ADB's real strength has been in our ability to institutionalize this across the board. What it means in practice is that every project team, irrespective of the sector, public or private, has a gender specialist that's called to that team, and they are responsible for ensuring that gender designs are integrated into the project through a tool called a gender action plan. So it's very concrete. I think a real strength also with ADB is that we have a corporate target around achievement of results for the project. So we also do a check and balance at project completion. So based on that system, we have, as Druna said, it's kind of become part of our DNA because we've been doing it for a while. We have very much overachieved those targets. So what our recent development has been is that we've looked at, okay, we've achieved these targets. Actually, last year we were about like in the high 90s for the past few years. We've had all our projects have had some gender designs, but we know that the gender issues in the region are far from gone. And we saw that through COVID. And if anything, COVID, like all disasters or economic shocks, showed that the fault lines of gender equality are still very real. Whenever you have a shock, you see regression. And so we felt that we needed to lift our game and step up. We could have taken the easy route and just tinkered, but we decided to really challenge ourselves as a bank. So what we've done now is we have revamped our system, whereby we are going to continue with the same approach, but we're going to make it much harder for projects to achieve that categorization, because we're going to really tighten the kinds of indicators that we will count towards achievement of these categories. And that means that certain things that are run-of-the-mill that we always should be doing, we will continue doing, but we won't give people the same credit for. So those are things such as having equal or women's attendance in events, workshops, and training. Yes, that's very important. We should still do that. But ADB, quite frankly, should not be doing any training where we don't involve women and bring people, give equal access. So those kinds of things won't count anymore, even though we will still do it. Similarly, things such as universal design around infrastructure. We have to do that, of course, but we're not going to give people credit. So we're really lifting the bar. And with that lifting the bar, we have a new target of 60% of projects will be what we call either focused or well gender mainstreamed, and a new baseline of 54%, basically making it harder for everybody. It's a challenge, but we think we need to do this. And I guess the last thing I will say is that another important part about our strategy is it's recognizing that gender mainstreaming on its own is not enough. We need to really incentivize a greater focus on the social norm approach and to go above and beyond that. One mechanism that we have for that is under our Asian Development Fund. It's something called the Sustainable Development 5 thematic pool, which is basically we will give additional grants to projects that really focus on SDG 5. And my colleague Keiko will be talking about that later. So I might stop there for now and happy to give some examples in the next round. Thank you.
Thank you both. I think the message is very clear. I think the evidence is very powerful for global advocacy. And also it is very important to integrate gender equality as one of the corporate priorities. And Sam, I like the words that you like challenges, and I really encourage you to keep challenging yourselves. The next question is actually, I will ask the same question, but I will expect your answers from different angles, because we are discussing gender equality, which is a global issue. But we discuss in the context of Asia and the Pacific. Hannah, you are World Bank Group, the gender director. You cover all the global different regions. And what would be the most kind of the eminent challenges and opportunities in the Asia and the Pacific? And then you can just maybe compare to the other regions and then from global perspective. And then we could ask Sam, you look at this region and ADB is a home doctor to client countries, and then I suppose that you're kind of specialized home doctor in this regard. So let's hear Hannah first, and followed by Sam's intervention, please.
So let's start with the achievements in the region, in East Asia and the Pacific. I think one of the key achievements in gender equality over the past decades has been girls' education and education of young women. And we see it in most countries where data exists that actually girls and young women are exceeding not only in numbers, but also in results compared to boys and men. And this is a great potential for the future, highly educated women. The other area where the achievement has been significant is in health. Health of everyone, including for girls and women, and including also nutrition. And the third area I would highlight again, and especially compared to other regions, is actually financial inclusion. There has been a recent progress in expanding access and to financial services and the use of financial services, also not only bank accounts, but financial services more broadly. Now, of course, in some of these, on financial access, we see that, it's still not perfect. There is still way to go. We see for women entrepreneurs that it is still a bit harder to access capital. But certainly the region is doing relatively well compared to the other regions. Now, what I would see as a challenge for near future, I would say number one is gender-based violence. It is not unique to this region. Unfortunately, it's a global challenge, but the manifestation in the region are significant. And the solution, of course, requires reforms, requires comprehensive services for survivors, but also requires efforts to shift norms, shift gender norms, engage boys so that the perceptions and the mindsets and the attitudes change. The second challenge I would highlight, but it's also an opportunity, actually relates to women's participation in productive jobs and the ability also to build and expand their businesses. Building on the huge human capital, the participation of women in productive jobs represents a key opportunity for countries. But that's where progress needs to be made. And the third area, final area, I would say women's leadership and participation in decision making. Whether it is in the private sector, where we see that when women participate in decision-making, companies are more profitable and also are more successful in reducing their carbon footprint. We see that when women participate in decision-making in utilities, public utilities, whether it's energy or water, that actually services are better, the coverage of services, the quality of services is better. We see that when women participate in community decision-making and local governance, that the decisions about investments and activities at the community level are better and better for everyone. And I think that's the key. And again, it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity. With increasing the participation of women in decision-making, we see that the results really are better for everyone. So that's what I would see for the way forward. And it's encouraging that, with the evidence, there is an increasing also appetite for countries to move in this direction.
Thank you. So yes, I mean, the region has made huge strides, and we some of us actually in the room were also there. We recently had the Beijing Plus 30 in Bangkok. We were there, and it was really celebrating the successes of the region. But at the same time, the progress has been no way fast enough. There's still a lot of work that remains undone. So maybe I'll just focus on maybe sort of like four areas. So I think one is, and Hannah, you touched on this, women's labor force participation and entrepreneurship. I mean, it's a huge area. Even before COVID, this region was, I think, one of the few, if not the only region in the world where we actually had a declining female labor force participation rate for a range of reasons. And COVID hit, it affected a lot of the sectors where women were very concentrated in the nature of employment. It's come back, but it's not come back quick enough. So I think going forward, how do we actually prepare women for the jobs of the future? And a lot of that relates to green jobs, digital jobs, and back to the education system and getting more women to STEM, for example. You talked about financial inclusion, entrepreneurship opportunities. I think we need to look at women's economic labor force participation holistically. And I guess the flip side of that, and you touched on this a little bit, Taka, and I know it's a topic you like, is care. So what is stopping women from entering the labor force? That's a big issue. The unpaid care burden, which we know also, if you combine paid and unpaid care work in the region, it's one of the highest in the world, around 4 times compared to men. And so from a gender perspective, it's the whole spectrum of care, but a big part of it is childcare, particularly for the ages of under 2. So how can we as multilateral banks address this issue? I think we need to look at the care ecosystem more holistically to provide more meaningful ways to provide quality care, affordable care, and invest in that as a sector. The third, I would say, is the whole climate agenda. I mean, it's a global agenda. It's the biggest existential threat globally. But I think we look at countries in the region that are most impacted by climate shocks. A lot of them are in the Asia-Pacific region. So that has huge implications for, I think we know that the impacts of climate fall disproportionately on women and girls. So how do we have gender responsive adaptation solutions? How do we get more women at the table? Speaking of climate, very happy we have Commissioner Herrera here from the Philippines who will talk about some of that later. But it's also being cognizant of some of the real emerging climate issues for the region which have a gender dimension. One area that ADB has been working a lot on lately, and increasingly so, is the impact of extreme heat. Huge issue for the countries of the region and has significant gender dimensions that are not very well understood. So we need to build the evidence base around that. Some of it is biological. A lot of it is around social norms of women's ability to escape the heat and manage heat, find cooling solutions, and how do we work with our developing member country governments to plan how they're going to manage heat in a gender responsive way. Last 2 points, and that relates to climate. The region also has a lot of small island developing states and different natures of gender play out in that area. It's really important to look at that. And I'm thinking particularly of the Pacific Island region. And again, I agree with gender-based violence, which again is also very exacerbated in the Pacific region. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Jaka, if I may, I would like to follow on Sam's point about care and just to illustrate how transformational actually expanding access to quality and affordable childcare is. So it is about enabling women to participate in the labor force and have built careers. It creates jobs, good quality jobs. Evidence shows that actually quality care also improves development outcomes for children, right? And their readiness and success in school. And interestingly, our recent research in Indonesia shows that when employees have access to childcare, productivity in companies increases by 10%. So there is also the private sector case for care. So that's just to illustrate, it's not only about women, right? But investing in these in these enabling services and investing in gender equality really has huge benefits for everyone.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I think childcare is definitely one great example that the joint efforts of the government, the private sector, and also multilateral institutions come together, give ideas, and so that we can gradually shift the social norms towards the ultimate goal of gender equality. So time is very short. I mean, you just provided with a lot of food for thought. I mean, I cannot wrap up at all. But let me ask the final question, that the collaboration among different development partners, in particular World Bank and ADB, is critical. So if you just give us a very brief statement on how important partnership is and between the World Bank and ADB or any other institutions from your point of view. Thank you.
So I think it's one of the lessons of past decades is that advancing gender equality requires a concerted effort. It is not about one intervention that will make a difference. It is not about one particular investment. So the partnership in generating the data and supporting countries to have access to gender data, to understand what the barriers are, the partnership in generating knowledge on why and how to advance gender equality, and the partnership also in coordinating around coherent investments and policy actions to advance specific gender equality. That's really key. So, and we have a lot of specific examples at the country level, and fortunately at the country level there are platforms for partners together to do joint activities in terms of supporting, for example, national statistics offices in building their capacity on data, or supporting different ministries on integrating gender analysis in their work, and also in coordinating on what we do as partners in supporting both the public and the private sector.
Yeah, I agree with everything Hannah said. So just to supplement, I think it's really about how we can amplify our voice as joint partners in the region to bring more way in and how we influence all the different players we work with on what the issues are. And I think some examples of that maybe at project level, whether it be co-financing, for example, or shared research, but it's also at a sort of broader regional or global level. And maybe a concrete example of that is we are all part of a working group on gender equality. And so we organize joint events, we share experience. We have a MDB Gender Summit every 3 years. We have one coming up in May. So that's a good way where we can join together and give the same messaging. And one really concrete thing we did together is for the International Day of Elimination of Violence 2 days ago. On Monday, yes. We 10 MDBs, or actually now 11, have jointly issued a commitment around the need to end gender-based violence. So that's about really amplifying voice altogether and putting the same message out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you very much, Hannah. And then I think this is the end of the first session. And let's thank the both ladies for this great discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's move on to the next component of the forum, titled The Private Sector Perspectives on Gender Equality and Inclusion Initiatives. We have Ms. Mika Nabeshima, who is the Executive Officer and the Group Chief Sustainability Officer of the Tokyo Marine Holdings with us. Nabeshima-san, please be seated in the middle on the podium. And also we have Shivani Basun Sakdeva, who is the founder and the CEO of India Alternatives, joining us from Doha today. Shivani, please come in.
Yes, hello, am I audible?
Great, thank you. I'm sure we are going to see you on the screen shortly. Thank you. And the moderator of this component is Sarah Twigg, who is the Gender Lead East Asia and the Pacific International Finance Corporation, IFC. Please be seated. You have 30 minutes, so that clock there, you have until 10:45. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I have to, first of all, acknowledge Shavani for waking up very early in the morning in Doha. So thank you very much for joining us at this very early hour.
My pleasure.
I think this conversation actually is very pertinent and flows very nicely from many of the things we just heard from our respective directors from the World Bank Group, from the World Bank and also from ADB, because many of the issues which they talked about are exactly some of the themes and the issues that we'll hear about from these two esteemed women business leaders over the course of the next 30 minutes. So I want to start with a question to both of you. You are both really pioneers in your respective countries and in your respective industries. So Mika, you were the first woman to hold a C-suite position at Tokyo Marine Holdings, which you took over in 2021 was when you received that position. And Shivani, you were also one of the first female fund managers to found a fund in India when you started the India Alternatives Private Equity and VC. When you started the fund in India. At a time when the Indian VC and private equity ecosystem was relatively new. So in a sense, you both, I think, represent this idea of women's corporate leadership and the role that women can play, and also this notion of really shattering the glass ceiling. So I think it would be really interesting to just hear a bit about your respective journeys to these positions, and I guess what were some of the defining moments and even some of the key people who really helped you on this journey. So Mika, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I'm Mika Nabeshima with Tokyo Marine Holdings, and I'm very honored to participate as a speaker in this forum. Thank you very much. And I'd like to share my experience and my thoughts on the gender gap. I started working back in 1991, right out of college in a very traditional Japanese company. Back then, traditional Japanese companies would only hire women out of college and right out of college. And so I decided that I need to get some experience with the Japanese company. That was, I just wanted to give you a backdrop of the era. The Equal Employment Opportunity Act came into effect in 1987. So I am considered one of the first generation of women who started working in the private sector in a so-called career track. Sort of in the group of men, there are a few females. Of course, women worked in the workplace in the private sector, but they just weren't in the same sort of track. We had different courses. So that also leads to the pay gap issue of today. So at the time in my class, the cohort was about 450 altogether, and there were 27 women. And so that's about 6%. Now today we have 8 remaining, which is not actually not a bad outcome for the time. I started working in the claims management in the front line of insurance companies, and that I think gave me an opportunity to really learn about the business and build on my career. Because before, women used to be in the back office a lot instead of being put in the front line. So that was a great opportunity. I also moved around a lot. The company would relocate employees in different locations in Japan and overseas. I moved with my family. I have 2 children. And also the Child Care Leave Act came into place in '93. So I took advantage of that, and I was one of the first to take a year off to raise the children. But of course, I didn't do this all by myself. I had a support network. I was fortunate enough to have a partner who was not just willing, but wanted to be part of childcare, and also had my parents nearby to support. But when I relocated, I had to rebuild that support network outside of my immediate family. But having the network of supporters is really what helped a lot. And I also had a mentor that I could, talk to when I would hit the wall, which I did many times. Back then, the society or our clients even didn't really think that women would be in a responsible position. And so they were quite surprised when I show up, and they would be looking at, okay, is there somebody else coming to the table? Like, no, it's me. But, years go by, and once you build that trust that I can actually do this, then, more opportunities come. So I think it's a sort of a repeat process of really trying to do your job well and earn that trust. So I've always had this determination that I wanted to keep working because I wanted to have a choice in life, and I also wanted to make decisions on my own without being totally dependent on somebody else. And so I wanted to continue working, and I think that time was just right. I mean, it was very difficult still, but the society was, I think, ready for women to continue working, and so it was during that sort of transition time. But it still wasn't the norm, and so I hit many walls and big hurdles, but I was able to get over them because I had a good support, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you. Shivani?
Oh, thank you. That was lovely listening to Mika, and in many ways resonates with my own story. I grew up in India, and I moved to the US in 1992 to pursue my undergraduate at a small liberal arts college. It was an all-women's college in America called Mount Holyoke. After graduating, I spent a few years in the US. I got my MBA from Wharton. I worked on Wall Street in private equity. And in 2006, I attended a Wharton conference in Mumbai, and I heard a gentleman called Amitabh Kant, who was then the CEO of Niti Aayog, which was the apex public policy think tank in India. And he spoke a lot about the growth opportunities in India and how young people could come back and help shape that story. He didn't specify the difference between young women and men, this story resonated very well with me. I moved back. I started working at a private equity fund in India, but my goal was eventually to start my own. And then, increasingly, I decided to start something in the mid market because it was completely underserved. Interestingly, I met my first investor when I was 5 months pregnant. So, a friend of a friend introduced me, and I met this gentleman, and he said, I would love to back you. Apologies, I think there is a bit of an echo in this line. Just once.
We can hear you well.
Oh, you can hear me? You don't hear an
Yes, it's
echo?
clear on our end.
Oh,
No,
fantastic.
no echo
Okay.
here.
Wonderful. So he turned around and said, I would love to back this. And I was shocked because had I been a man, I would have jumped across and shook his hand and said, thank you so much. But of course, I turned around and said, oh my God, I'm 5 months pregnant. And he just said, congratulations. And he went back to the pitch book. I was completely taken aback. So I went back, and like Mika, I'm very fortunate to have a very supportive partner. I went back and I repeated the story to my husband, and he turned around and said, congratulations. And that was a defining moment for me because I had my first investor, who was a man, I had my husband, all being very supportive. And I said, well, if everybody else thinks I can, why don't I think that? And I turned around and said, I'm going to do it. So, of course, I waited for my son to be, a few months old when I started the platform. Then I had this unique challenge because I wanted to raise money from the local banks. And the local banks in India were all, the chairmans and the managing directors were all men. So there was one woman who had been a trailblazer in her time. Her name was Ranjana Kumar. So I reached out to her and I asked her advice on how to go about it. Over the years, I built a relationship with her, and I was very fortunate to bring her on as an advisory board member. So she guided me in the early days. So just like Mika talked about having a mentor and having a support system, I completely resonate with that. So Ranjana helped me. Of course, I also shared the same challenges because oftentimes when I would go into a meeting, the chairman or managing director would keep looking behind me because he would assume that I was in the meeting to support somebody else. Uh, and then I started doing something a little humorous. I started making light of the situation, and I would look at the door as well. And then, we would both laugh, and then we would start the meeting. Of course, there have been other challenges along the way. I have had one of my investors who went through financial difficulties, and so I had to engineer a secondary exit for that gentleman in my fund. But overall, I think the last decade has been exhilarating. We have performed very well. I attribute that to a nice gender balance in my team and in terms of our gender lens investing. And we have had successful exits, completely exited our first fund at 4.5x. We have had good returns from our second fund, and we are getting ready to launch our third fund next year.
Very, very interesting. And I think one of the things that struck me was that you both talked about, and this resonates with what our esteemed Mr. Takahiro spoke about, actually the role of men, that, in a way, there were really important men also in each of your respective career
Absolutely.
paths who helped to kind of, propel you on. So I think that's a really important lesson for us all to take away. Mika, I'm going to turn to you now. I mean, now that we know a little bit about the journey that you've been on and I guess what Japan was like when you started, Can you reflect a bit on what you see in terms of how gender equality has progressed in Japanese corporates, and I guess women's economic opportunities? We still know that there is a significant disparity in Japan in terms of women's workforce participation, the types of roles that women are in, the types of leadership positions. Yeah, so I guess where do you see that things are now, and where do you see that there are still opportunities for more progress?
I would say that there has been great progress in this area. As I built on my career, I became assistant manager, became manager, and then general manager, and then the first C-suite for Tokyo Marine Holdings. And I was in the group chief diversity and inclusion officer. But at the time, I could tell that DE&I has become something that the corporations need to embrace, and that it is part of the strategy, growth strategy, not something that we have to do because it's the right thing to do. Of course, it's the right thing to do, but not just that. We need DE&I for growth. So that has been a major shift, I think, from the 1990s to basically today. And so women have been able to keep working. When I started in the 90s, the expectation was that women will leave the workforce when they get married or when they have the first child. But now, because of the Family Leave Act and the childcare system becoming very good in most places, that women are able to continue working. But the challenge is what kind of work, right? So the labor force participation rate in Japan is actually very high. For female, it is 72.4%, which is very high even in the OECD countries. It was 50% in 1980s, so that's made a great progress. But as we saw during COVID, women were in vulnerable positions or in jobs. And so the gender pay gap still comes from this disparity. And then I think thanks to COVID, how we work has drastically changed. Before it was we show up to the office, right, physically and work, and then we go home. And that made it very difficult for men to participate in childcare or household because they worked long hours. And so I think what we need to change now is how we work. Now, the places and time of work has now become very flexible. So that has helped a lot of women as well, and also men who are now wanting to be part of the child's life. The mentality of young men are changing. Now in Japan, you will see fathers with infants and toddlers by themselves. Now, 30 years ago, you would see men with little kids, and you would also see the mom there, right? So now I see men doing this by themselves, and I think they're doing it willingly, which is a big change. And I think that this generation gap is really something that we need to address in Japan as well. So people in their 50s, men in their 50s, have a different notion of who should bear the childcare than the people now in the 20s and 30s. So I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, this idea of the generational gap. And I think we're seeing that in some other countries in the region, that the newer generations are much more willing to share these responsibilities, and they want to, right? I think to your point. So Shivani, now turning a bit more to the investor perspective. We know that recently the World Economic Forum predicts that it's going to take another 149 years to close gender gaps in South Asia. And so organizations like your own, like India Alternatives, who are signing up to initiatives. I know recently you've signed up for IFC's India Gender Collaborative, which is delivered under the partnership with Japan. And you're making a series of other public commitments around gender and really integrating gender into your business strategy. But we know that for many investors, this is still, something that they see as a nice to do or a CSR activity. So I guess what would you say to those kind of leaders who are still skeptical that this really is core business? And how do you think about this from your business perspective in terms of the business impacts that this kind of strategy has?
Thank you. I'm going to quote an IFC Gender Smart Investing report that says that gender balanced funds realized an excess net IRR of 1.7 percentage points greater than, all male funds when controlling for vintage, geography, and strategy. So those are hard numbers, right? So 1.7 percentage points increase in IRR, over a longer period is a significant difference in terms of overall returns, in terms of contribution to GDP, and so on. We have actually really enjoyed incorporating gender lens into our investment strategy. So it forms a key part of our investment strategy and one of our core investment themes. So if you look at the addressable market, and World Bank, again, World Bank reports, BCG reports, we see that in India, women control 60 to 80% of consumption decisions, making them the largest addressable market in India with a potential of anywhere between $1 to $1.5 trillion. So I would say to the skeptics that this is the largest addressable market in India, certainly across the world. And what's happened is that you have had a lot of all male funds viewing these opportunities as an incremental opportunity, as something to be done on the side, as you said, as a nice to have. Whereas it is a very core, exciting, and transformational segment. So we have backed companies that cater to women to make their lives, better in terms of products and services. We have backed companies that are focused on women's health. And I'm very excited about the change that's actually happening on the ground in India. So if you look at the labor statistics, again, it's yet to sort of come to bear. But if you look at the data from the Ministry of Education, it's very exciting. So if you see 21 or 22, there were 2 million STEM graduates in India, of which 44% were women. I'm talking about STEM here. So that's really exciting. And then if you saw COVID and what happened, you saw a lot of women starting out businesses and a lot of women-led startups. So again, I pulled this data from the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade in our country, the DPIIT. And on 15th May 2023, the number of women-led startups, they tend to be around areas of personal care, food, fashion, etc. But the number of women-led startups in these areas was 3,644. So these are large numbers. So again, coming back to your question, what would I say to the investment leaders? I would say it would be a real shame if these ambitious women who are coming out of STEM, who are starting companies, eventually do not progress because there's not enough of a lens in order to evaluate what they're bringing to the table. And we at India Alternatives believe that Indian women are going through a cultural mindset shift. We talked about generation. We are seeing it in India as well. So in the earlier generation, even if women had discretionary income in India, they would say, I'm going to spend it on my husband, my children, my in-laws. They prioritize themselves lower. Whereas this generation is saying, if I'm not happy, I'm not healthy, I'm not fit, then my family isn't either, right? So I'll pause there.
Fantastic. And I think what's interesting as well is this idea that this generational shift is real, and it's bringing with it kind of meaningful changes in terms of what the next generation is looking for, what they're willing to spend their money on, and of course, what they're looking for in terms of a career and a family and a future. So Mika, looking, I guess, beyond your own organization, do you think that there is real appetite from Japanese companies to be moving more towards kind of meaningful DEI initiatives and gender equality? And I guess in this vein, what do you see might be some of the biggest hurdles or the biggest barriers that are getting in the way or that might get in the way? I think looking really specifically at Japan.
I do see the momentum in the last, 10 years or so. The corporate governance code has changed and they're looking for more diversity on the board, which a lot of the big companies are still lacking and working on. And each companies have been working on initiatives to close the gender gap. But now we have some movements such as 30% Club in Japan, where a lot of the big companies will get together and share good practices. And it's become a social movement. I feel like it's not just like each company doing its own initiative, but it's a social movement now. There's also, there's still a resistance to change. There's always a resistance to change in anything. But I think there are some skeptics in the majority, I think, even though there's a lot of evidence that this is a good thing to do, people's mentality don't change overnight. So that needs to change. And I think, some good practices, I mean, the first thing is the clear commitment by the top. That's definitely needed. The clear message needs to be given so that the middle managers who are actually supporting and developing the young leaders, men and female, that they understand and need to come over the unconscious bias and support them. I think, supporting women, encouraging them and giving them development opportunities is really important. In the past, there was some resistance to just gather women and have a training session just for them. But now that we realize that there's definitely a gender gap, that is what we need to address. And that's been going on. And so that's a good sign. Mentorship is really important, as I said, but what we've been doing now is not just internal mentorship within the company, but across the industry. And it's good to do that because then the mentor doesn't really have any preconceived notion of what their work is like. And so that's been very effective. And also we're starting to do a reverse mentorship because of that generation gap as well. So that's also effective as well. I would say that some of the hurdles are still the unconscious bias and the social norms that still exist. And the caregiving is really predominantly still borne by women. So that needs to change. And also the legal and tax issues. I think that needs to be more gender neutral as well.
Yeah, I think you've raised some really important points here, particularly this idea that actually leaders first of all need to acknowledge that there is an issue, and then kind of make a commitment to address it. And I think that's often the first hurdle. And once you can get over that hurdle, then it can really trickle down to middle management. And I did want to also reflect on your comment about that, care is still a challenge, and we were here earlier this year with ADB to talk about exactly that, this issue around care in the region, and we know that for Japan that continues to be a space where there's room for improvement and room for more women working in the sector and higher quality and more access to those services. So I think all topics that resonate with everyone here in the room and online. Shivani, turning to you now. So I think you've demonstrated and you've referred to some reports that there's very clearly a business reason to actually focus on an integrated gender lens into investments. We still see there are some skeptics, but hopefully most investors listen to the numbers, and so I think increasingly we should see more and more investors who are also following this approach. So maybe then just thinking about your own experience in terms of how you've gone about doing this. If you were sharing some advice with other investors who were looking to integrate more of a gender lens into their own investment approaches, what are some of the approaches that you would recommend? How are some of the ways that you've done this as an institution?
So we, of course, are very focused on the commercial returns, and we wanted our universe of investable companies to be as large as possible. We're also very passionate about being a part of the change. We know that the change isn't there yet. So what we did is, and which may be practical input to other investors, is that coming in, we did not restrict ourselves to say that we will invest only in companies that are founded by women. However, what we have committed is that 1/3 of our portfolio companies over time will be women-led. So this is a decent commitment. It's also one that other funds can do. Again, on the ground, we have taken practical initiatives because we find that there are women in the mid-level who drop out care is a big reason. Another reason is that a lot of them don't, sometimes don't aspire to the top job because they want to be over prepared. So we have, many sessions around executive coaching. We try to conduct executive coaching for women in our portfolio companies. We ensure that the funnel is wide and the funnel is non-traditional when recruiting for senior people at our portfolio. We find that this is particularly helpful in a lot of the technology companies in India, which have traditionally been, all male. Across the thousands of companies that we've invested in over time, we have seen the change on the ground with these practical initiatives of just supporting and empowering women, bringing women together, creating networks, creating mentorship. Some of the things that Mika and me talked about, right? So how do we do that at a larger scale and across the portfolio? And I think that this is something that is very doable for other funds as well. We've held periodic breakfast series. We have a ladies power lunch where we bring in a successful woman entrepreneur to talk to others. So these are just some of the examples of initiatives that we have undertaken, which are in fact quite doable.
Yes, I think that's very interesting and very practical, I think, and things which are relatively, simple in a way to implement. I think we're at time, but maybe I just want to leave the conversation with reflecting on I think the three points that you both were talking about, because it resonates back earlier to what we were talking about in the first session around, the need for more women in leadership, the need for more women's voices. And I think you both talked about the importance of women's networks and bringing women together, the importance of mentorship, and really the importance of investing in women's training and actually building women to have the capacities and the skills they need for leadership. So I think you both embody that, and thank you very much for joining us today and sharing both your personal experiences and also your professional experiences. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Enjoyed the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are going to move on to the next session. Our next session is going to be.
Sorry, we have one. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
வெளியில வர முடியாது, ரொம்ப காட்டுக்குள்ள இருக்குது, படிப்பறிவு இல்ல, எல்லா விஷயத்தையும் கத்துக்க முடியுமா அந்த பொண்ணுக்கு அப்படிங்கிறது நிறைய போராட்டம் இருந்தது. நான் விடாமுயற்சி பண்ணிட்டேன்.
देखिए लोन सबसे शुरुआती जब तक हम लोग समूह से नहीं जुड़े थे या लोन नहीं लिया था, तब तक तो एक वही होता है ना कि बहुत बड़ा धमाका, डर लगता है लोन लेने से कि इसको देंगे कैसे हम.
10,000 சம்பளத்தை வச்சு என்ன செய்யறது, என்னுடைய பொருளாதாரத்தை மேம்படுத்திக்க முடியல. சரி, ஒரு பிசினஸ் பண்ணா மட்டும்தான் நம்மளால லைஃப்ல நல்லா வர முடியும் அப்படின்ற எண்ணம் இருக்கு.
IFC has worked with us in this project. It has tried to address the missing middle where loan sizes for the rural women, which is too small for banks or too large for microfinance, could be addressed.
நான் வீட்டுல இருந்தே ஒரு சிறிய அளவுல பண்ணிட்டு இருந்தேன். என்னோட தொழில் விரிவுபடுத்துறதுக்கு NGP லோன் சொல்லிட்டு வாழ்ந்து காட்டும் திட்டம் மூலியமா எங்களுக்கு கொடுத்தாங்க. ஒரு கடை மாதிரி போட்டு அந்த மிஷினரி எல்லாம் அமைச்சு நான் என்னோட மசாலா பொடி விரிவுபடுத்திட்டு இருக்கேன். பேக் பண்ணி பக்கத்துல இருக்கிற கடைகளுக்கு கொடுத்துட்டு இருப்போம். ஆன்லைன்ல போட்டோம்னா அது மூலியமா நிறைய ஆர்டர்ஸும் நமக்கு கிடைக்கும்.
सबसे शुरुआत में जब मैंने किया था तो वो 1300 रुपए भी मुझे मेरी मदर से लेना पड़ा था. उन्होंने ज्यादा दिए थे लेकिन मैं डरते डरते मात्र 1300 का ही सामान लेके आई थी कि अगर ये नहीं बिका तो क्या होगा. कि हम लोगों ने जागती आंख से बोलो या सोती, ये सपना देखा है कि हम ऐसा चाहते हैं हमारा एक सेंटर हो. जिसमें सभी महिलाएं आए और काम करें। ये चीज प्लान किया हम लोगों ने और बैंक का भी सपोर्ट रहा।
என்னோட இன்கம் வச்சுதான் என்னோட குடும்பமே ரன் ஆயிட்டு இருக்கு. நான் மகளிர் குழுல இருக்கிறேன். அவங்க தான் அப்புறம் சொன்னாங்க பிசினஸ்க்கு வந்துட்டு இந்த மாதிரி கவர்மெண்ட்லயே லோன் எல்லாம் தராங்க. இந்த லோனை வச்சு கூட நீ அடுத்து ஆரம்பிக்கலாம். இந்த தொழில் நடத்தி நான் வந்து ஒரு 4 பேருக்கு வேலை கொடுப்பேன் அப்படின்ற இது கனவாதான் இருந்தது.
When I see thousands of rural women come forward and take this plunge, it is not by any push from their family. It's just their sole drive to ensure that I can make it and I will make it.
Thank you very much. Sorry for interruption caused by me. We'll make sure to put the YouTube link of this video on the announcement page of the seminar so that you might be able to take a look at again as I disrupted the first 30 seconds. Sorry about that. Okay, so next component of the forum is going to be the panel discussion titled Driving Economic Growth and Fostering Resilience in the Context of the Addressing Care and Climate Change. We have Rachel Ann Herrera, the Commissioner of the Climate Change Commission Philippines, with us today. Please be seated in the middle, please. Thank you very much. And also, we do have Pat Maliki, who is a Deputy Minister for Population and Manpower, Ministry of National Development Planning, well known as Bapenas in Indonesia, connecting us from Jakarta. Pat Maliki, please come in. And then we do have a moderator for this session, Chieko Yokota, Gender Specialist, Gender Equality Division of the Asian Development Bank. You have 30 minutes until 11:20 on the clock. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Koichi, for keeping us on time. And I'm aware that we are over time, but I'm looking forward to exciting conversation. So I think we have already had quite a great overview about the respective sessions and the agendas that we are going to focus on, which is climate change and care. So Sam and Hannah already talked about this, and we have two esteemed guests from Philippines and Indonesia who will share with us a wealth of knowledge and diverse insights on this agenda. I just want to mention a little bit on how the climate change and care intersects. And as we all know that women and girls are disproportionately impacted by the climate change due to their roles in unpaid care work. And in the event of extreme weather, so women and girls spend a lot of time in fetching water and fuel and taking care of the sick and elderly people and managing household. And for example, in the Philippines last April, due to the extreme heat weather conditions, the public school got closed and the parents needed to manage both and family and work responsibilities. They really juggled. So this is one example of the impact of the climate change and how it impacts care. And as Hannah and Sam's session mentioned, so by investing in care infrastructure, and that can lead to the economic growth for having more women in labor force participation. And this is good for society and good for business. So I hope that Pak Maliki has joined, and it'd be great if he can join us virtually on screen.
Hello, good morning. I actually already
Good morning, Pak Maliki. Yeah, we see you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for joining from Indonesia.
Thank you for inviting
And
me.
as Taka mentioned in the opening remark, it is really important to have a male ally. So we are really great to have a male speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So first, yes, thank you. First, I wish to invite Commissioner Herrera from the Philippines Climate Change Commission. So Commissioner Herrera is a lawyer with 15 years of policy, advocacy, and management experience in environment and climate change sector. And she has led key initiatives, including the development of the country's first national adaptation plan. And Commissioner Herrera has been a fundamental driver for the development of the NDC GAP, Nationally Determined Contribution Gender Action Plan, for which ADV and Climate Change Commission collaborated together, and this policy document has been launched last October. So Commissioner Herrera, can you please share with us about the NDC GAP and how it aims to integrate the gender perspectives into climate action, and what are the key challenges and opportunities in ensuring that these initiatives effectively promote gender equality and resilience? Please put up the slide.
Good morning. Thank you, Chico, and a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Philippines Climate Change Commission. Just coming from the heels of COP29, we are really upfront about the role that we have embraced as one of the most vulnerable countries in the region, if not the world. And in our NDC, we have set a high ambition target of 75% greenhouse gas emissions reduction over 5 sectors: agriculture, waste, industry and products and processes, transport, energy, and soon to come forestry. And so, as has been mentioned, we had the great collaboration and the completion of the country's first NDC Gender Action Plan this year. And it was actually an acknowledgement that when we're about to adopt and launch our NDC implementation plan, also together with the Asian Development Bank, we had an acknowledgement that many of our gender and climate policies, many of our climate change and DRR policies were gender blind. So despite the mandate very clearly stated in our Climate Change Act of 2009 and our Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction Management Act, as well as many other host of laws on environment and climate, many of our agencies still did not have clear guidance or express guidance on interlinkages and ensuring that the gender and climate nexus are addressed in all programs and projects. And so we had, of course, this active role in working with the UNFCCC in terms of national communications, expressing this clear link. And we are only the 4th country to adapt in the region, to adopt an NDC gap. And this is something I think that we must be proud of. But then we know that the work is only just beginning. So our NDC Gender Action Plan aims to ensure that government efforts, especially in the executive department, which are tasked to implement the policies and measures, numbering close to 1,000 over the sectors mentioned, will not be deepening further the inequalities that our women, in fact, there are other vulnerable communities and sectors face with the worsening impacts of climate change. And the plan focuses on 4 key areas. First is the governance, the policies, and the institutional arrangements, recognizing that the Philippines has always used a whole of nation, whole of government approach in all areas of climate and DRR. And we are also focusing or zooming in on actual adaptation and mitigation interventions. And the third aspect is the MRV, or monitoring, reporting, and verification, to form that a robust feedback cycle and inform the annual budgeting. And finally, but not the least important, I think very important for this session today is the financing aspect. So those are the 4 areas of focus of the GAP. The GAP acknowledges that the gender and the climate departments and units across government do not necessarily talk all the time. And we are going to approach this work very intentionally. We will create across the board a gender focal point system interagency working group, and we hope to have ADB still supporting us in the future as we are sure we will discover gaps perhaps or the need to build a really strong foundation for this GFPS coordination system that we will institutionalize. And this is a priority of the government. We already do this in programming and budgeting, convergence, and we have around 16 plus departments apart from the 4 ministries that I earlier mentioned. So the NDC Gender Action Plan also acknowledges that we must work strongly on building the databases on sex and age disaggregation, and if we can still further expand that to include income, class, ethnicity. As in the Philippines, we are a country of 7,600 islands, and we have different contexts of women's experiences in addressing or as part of climate action and as stakeholders actually and leaders in their communities. So through this gap, we want to build the evidence of what we already know anecdotally in terms of the differentiated impacts on women and men and the intersection of these on discrimination of factors such as age and so on. And just to cite, for example, in the agricultural sector where women are a big, they're the main borrowers rather in agricultural households because they have greater access to microcredit. And in fact, they are better payers than the men. And because they have, as we understand, they have strong pressure to bridge resource gaps whenever there are constraints experienced by the family or the organization at the community level. But in terms of formal credit, they have a harder time accessing capital because of ownership of land. In 2022, data found that only 32% of women compared to 67+% of men own certificates of land ownership. So this is in the agricultural sector. So we want to increase participation of women in consultations across agricultural communities and involve women in problem identification and design. So transport, we want to understand better gendered mobility patterns, reduce cases of GBV and sexual harassment. Those who have been to Manila, just the capital know how hard it is to do the daily commute, and you are in the commute for maybe 2 hours at the minimum each way going to work and back. So this is very much a priority for us. So agriculture, transport, energy, and waste and industry. Just to mention also because the solid waste management sector is very much divided into many chunks of work, and at the bottom are the women waste pickers. So that's something we want to address, and then we will work with local government units because based on the law, they have the mandate to ensure the segregation and so on. So maybe I can stop there. And so that is the overview of our NDC gap. And this QR code shows us where we can access the full document. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Harila. Please take this QR code, and we would really encourage you to take a look. That really explains what Commissioner Harila just mentioned. There are concrete activities and programs suggested by each sectors, and this really embodies the whole of the government approach that we have worked together. And we are really looking forward, going forward to collaboration in the future as well for the implementation. Thank you very much. So now I would like to turn to Pak Maliki. Thank you so much for waiting.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So Pak Maliki is an advocate and social welfare, inclusivity, aging, and care issues. And he coordinated the formulation of the national roadmap of people with disabilities and national strategy of aging. And in 2022, he developed the social economy registry covering all Indonesian population to ensure more proper and inclusive policy planning. And also he initiated Silani, an award-winning older people information system, digital platform, and a prototype of a community-based integrated older people care program. So now, Pak Maliki, can you please share Indonesia's approach for establishing a comprehensive care economy policy to promote inclusive and equal opportunities, particularly for women? And could you also please share examples of specific policies and programs that have been particularly successful? Over to you, Pak Maliki.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Chief Oyokora, for your kind introduction. And first of all, I would like to send my appreciations for the organizers, the World Bank, IFC, ADB, and also the Ministry of Finance of Japan and Japan International Cooperation Agency for inviting me here. It is a very privilege for us to convey our important agenda in the next 20 years. So in regards to your questions, next slide, please. Yeah. I'm happy to tell everyone that Indonesia is now officially entering new cabinet. And Mr. Prabowo is our president now. And also, we also have a new long development plan. The long-term development plan 2025-2045 that has been formally legalized into Act 59/2024 this year. And also, additionally, we have several regulations on care work and gender, including the very recent one, Act number 4/2024 on the welfare of mothers and infants. So these two alone, actually, the Act of RPGP, the long-term plan, as well as the Act for mothers and infants, has been a very strong act to be our fundamental base for a development of care economy and the social transformations to achieve our visions of an inclusive, equitable, and also to achieve the golden Indonesia. So one of our main policies on care economy was launched earlier this year, the Roadmap and National Action Plan of Care Economy. It is actually coordinated by the Ministry of Women Empowerment, we as a members, and it details 7 objectives on achieving transformations on care, including protections of new mothers, promoting the involvement of men, and protection and social security for care workers. Next slide, please. So Indonesia's approach for the care economy is detailed in the policy directive of the care economy roadmap that includes from accessibility, comprehensive and quality child care services and programs, and then investment and development of the older people care. We also include increasing men involvement in family care. And also we include social security for protections and economic welfare for care workers. So, as I think you understand, Indonesia is very still early in its development of care economy. And the issues of financing is still something we haven't settled. Most care institutions right now are government funded, but we really hope to graduate towards a financing mixed or social insurance. Although government subsidies will still be received by poor and also the vulnerable households. And in the last slides, we can see that Indonesia will maintain its commitment to enhancing the development of the care economy as a means of investing in gender equality and fostering increased participation of women in the labor force. And to this end, the government of Indonesia will strengthen the legal framework of gender equality, invest in affordable and accessible care services, and empower women in careers and entrepreneurships through care economy. And for this last point, we commit to reduce women's burden by providing access to financing, training, business network, while the care economy acknowledges caregiving as valuable work, allowing women to balance caregiving and also career advancement. I think I stop there.
Thank you very much, Pak Maliki, for such a great overview. And we are really impressed to hear about Indonesia's key national and law and policies to advance care economy. And the things that you mentioned, such as male involvement and the importance of private sector investment and professionalization of care, I think these all really resonates with us. Just wanted to share one example for Japan relating to this. So just a few days ago, I think it's around 2 or 3 days ago, the Japanese government decided to increase the salary of the care workers at daycare centers by 10.7%. This has been received as a great achievement because this has been an issue of, having these care workers at the limited working conditions and lower wage. And in terms of the male participation, so Japanese government mandates the company with employees more than 1,000 to disclose the ratio of the paternity leave. And this has really pushed this agenda. And 10 years ago, it was only 2%, but now it has increased to 30% of fathers taking paternity leave. So I think these are just some of the government initiatives that I wanted to share that to connect with what Pak Maliki mentioned. So now I would like to dig a little bit deeper on what you have shared. So going back to Commissioner Herrera. So you talked about the NDC gap, and we are keen to learn about what's the next step and what future strategies should be prioritized to ensure that climate change initiatives are inclusive and equitable, particularly for women and girls. And it would be great if you could please share with us some of your successful initiatives.
Thank you very much for that question. Based on our work just on mainstreaming gender and climate change, and now with this newly adopted gender action plan, we really would like more women in our government departments, leading the work on gender and climate change and ensuring that the nexus between the planning, project design, and financing is really strong. And we know that tools are very important. So even under this gap and moving forward across all government projects, we want to strengthen the harmonized gender and development guidelines. This is also being used in official development assistance approvals. And we want a sector-specific climate change, sector-specific tools that will provide indicators so that they don't have to, spend so much time wondering how they can ensure gender equality is embedded in the project design. So we want to develop this tool under the NDC gap. We will have checklists to ensure that project leadership is supportive of the GAD or gender equality goals, that consultants, the implementers have adequate gender and climate change expertise available throughout the project all the way to monitoring and evaluation. and that women are, the participation rate is very strong. So sometimes we think it's just a matter of inviting the women, but we want the women really at the community level. For us, it's very important, the local government units and champions at the grassroots to have their voice really lend, the value and a strong foundation to how projects will be implemented as these will affect them. So here on screen, I'm happy to share the some women winners or community resilience champions doing community-based forest and coastal management work. They are people's organizations fighting illegal logging, confiscating or seizing chainsaws. They're not scared at all. And these on the right side, they are doing livestock raising, vegetable farming for their own village with 68 farmer women leaders in the province of Albay, which is one of the most disaster-prone areas of the country as well. So just to illustrate really the importance also of education and capacity building, which we already know, but these have to be strengthened and these have to involve all women, not just those in government. So many of us in government realize now that we can learn so much more from those really at the front lines of climate change. And I'd like to also mention that in terms of education, we want to help develop modules with the education department so that more of our women and girls are into STEM and appreciate how STEM can help us transition from our goals of being an upper middle income country to really a green economy and right scaling our workers and no women left behind in building our workforce of green job workers. And that is also based on a new policy, the Philippines Green Jobs Act. And just to really put emphasis on grassroots empowerment, and we hope that gender people, have a place really with the finance people, be in the same room, but not forget that what we're working for is really at the ultimate, the goal really is to that this be felt at the community level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Herrera, to bringing our entire discussion to why we are doing this, right? And we learn so much from the community people, and we are really impressed by your initiative on that. And I heard that you just had this awarding ceremony like a few days ago for these women farmers and entrepreneurs. Thank you so much. So now I would like to come back to Pak Maliki. So thank you for sharing about the importance of public and also private financing and investing further in care economy. So I would like to ask, in what ways can investments and support in fostering care economy drive economic growth while reducing inequality and advancing social inclusion, particularly for women? Over to you, Pak Maliki.
Okay. First, when you mentioned about the paternity leaves in Japan, actually I have a valuable takeouts when I discussed about the possibility of lengthened the paternity leaves regulated in our Act, Mothers and Child, 1 year ago. So there is a very significant questions among men in the parliaments, what actually they will do with such long leaves. So this is very intriguing questions. So I guess we have to put more, I think, more into like a fundamental understanding on the equal responsibility of caring system in the family first, so that everyone will have the same visions on fostering gender balance in care economy. So this is also an investment as what you are referring to the questions. So inadequate care systems become a major barriers to closing gender gaps in labor markets around the world, I guess. In most Eastern countries, including Indonesia, women are expected to prioritize staying at home, caring for the children, parents, and doing domestic chores. And the works they believed are socially designed to women and girls. And also not they, but the men also believe they are socially designed to women and girls. So this choice isn't just rooted in the social norms. The high cost and also limited availability of childcare, daycare, and elderly housing, especially in the rural areas, creates a difficult choice for women. Either they work and abandon their family members, or they provide care and abandon their financial independence. So this is quite challenges for us. To answer these challenges, we already have put a few strategies in the next 5 years in our long-term development plan. And also we are going to reflect it in our medium-term development plan for this new cabinet in 5 years. So which are that we need to increasing the availability, accessibility, and affordability to childcare services through the expansion of the early childhood educations, or we call it PAUD, or is the pendidikan usia dini, this is early childhood education, to promote community-driven models of childcare, subsidy for daycare and early educations, and building daycares in companies. I guess this one is related also with what already supported by ADB to us. We have also the pilot, but it is all for the care for the elderly. And we also build like a community elderly care based on the community-based models. And this one, I guess, become like a very good models for us also to expand the community-driven for childcare. And then the second one is providing paternity and maternity leave for family development. This is for the maternity, we already expanded in the act, but for the paternity leave, we still have like a few days for the paternity leaves. That is including encouraging companies and businesses to provide flexible working schemes for the new parents. And then the third one is promoting the integrations of older people care, augmenting the existing services to better providing care. And in Bappenas, as I mentioned earlier, that we already have the pilot project. Silani is elderly information system that also referring to this pilot project, and we win for the as like a Technological Innovation Award by Aging Asia in Singapore. And thank you for ADB for the support for that. And then formalizing and regulating workers in home-based care. In this case is the domestic workers. And we are discussing the draft for bill on the domestic workers protections. It is still draft, and hopefully this next year it will be regulated by the parliaments. And then improving coordination and collaboration between responsible ministries, agencies, and stakeholders. And then we have to identify and developing the financing for the core, for the care, which include insurance scheme, social protection, and also the national health insurance. And the last one is promoting social norms for gender equitable caregiving roles. This is what I mentioned earlier about the big questions from the people, from most of the men, what they do with the long leaves for the paternity leaves. So we have to updating attitudes and also perceptions about the paid and unpaid roles of women, including support for women working outside the home, and also encouraging the community and religious leaders to play roles in promoting gender equality. In short, the government of Indonesia is now working to create a more inclusive and supportive environment for women in Indonesia, aiming not just to boost the country's economy, but also to tackle inequality and foster greater social inclusions. Investment in care economy, I guess this is an investment in women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Maliki, for very powerful remarks and sharing with us a lot of great concrete examples. And related to the paternity leave, this is really the end result is really to changing the social norm. So we really need to aim for that. Thank you so much for great conversation. And discussion is more and more, becoming very interesting. But however, we are on top of time for this session. So with that, I would like to wrap up this session. And thank you again so much for Commissioner Herrera and Pak Maliki for very insightful conversation. Please let us give a round of applause for our esteemed panelists.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your collaboration. So the next 40 minutes is going to be very interesting conversation. And please, understand that we may need to, not may actually, we are going to go a little bit over beyond the announced ending time. But try to aim to complete by at least 12:15 or 12:20. But the next 40 minutes is going to be interesting panel discussion, development partners' insight into gender challenges and solutions in the region. We have 4 panelists. We have Keiko Nobatsuka, the Principal Gender Development Specialist, Asian Development Bank. Please be seated. Thank you very much. Welcome. And also we have Mari Usami, Senior Advisor in Gender and Development, Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. Usami-san, please be seated. Thank you very much. We have Hilary Johnson, economist in the East Asia and the Pacific region, Chief Economist Office, the World Bank, joining us virtually. Hilary, please come in. Can you hear me? Hope she should be there in a minute. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And also, we do have Elizabeth Kwan, who is a Senior Specialist, Gender Equality, Australia Department of the Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT. Elizabeth, please come in.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you. And our moderator is Samantha Han, Director of Gender Equality Division of the Asian Development Bank. Welcome. Thank you.
So we will try to finish by 12:10. So hello again, everybody. Last session, but definitely not the least, sort of on the home stretch. And this session is particularly interesting because we've heard about the issues, we've had the couple of panels, and so this is now bringing in from a range of development partner perspectives on the different approaches and what are some of the solutions that we can bring. Recognizing that we all said earlier, right from the first session, Hannah and I, that this has to be a collective effort. We will also delve into some of the innovative approaches that focus on more of a transformative gender agenda, gender-based violence, women's labor force participation, and a topic which we actually haven't talked about a lot yet, intersectionality, the importance of remembering to address the different needs of women and girls and all the diversity, and that's really crucial for leaving no one behind agenda. As the region progresses on gender equality outcomes, there are still pockets that are going to be left behind, and there's a real need to sort of really delve in on that. So we have 4 great speakers with us, 2 here and 2 online. And what I'll do is I will introduce each of them sequentially and let them do their intervention. And then I will try to keep everyone on time. And each one will share their own unique approaches to addressing regional gender challenges and to drive impact at the end of the day for greater development outcomes. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Keiko from my team, who I work with daily. So Keiko is a principal gender specialist at ADB. She in particular focuses on women's entrepreneurship, that she's our focal point for that. And she's also been really critical in helping us take forward our 4 directions around our gender equality and our policy approaches. But today she's going to be talking specifically about the Asian Development Fund's SDG 5 earlier, which is also an area that she's really been championing. So over to you, Keiko.
Thanks a lot, Sam. I'll just wait for the PowerPoint slides to come up. And thank you again for this opportunity to talk with the World Bank, JICA, and the Japanese Ministry of Finance. It's a great opportunity to discuss how we invest in gender equality. Sorry, I realize I don't have. Yeah, sorry. Okay, great. Thank you. So So the Asian Development Fund is ADB's kind of special grant making for our poorest and most vulnerable countries across the region. And the title of today's overall session is about investments. And so this is clearly one investment. We've just had a replenishment round in 2024, and Japan was the lead donor for that. And we hit a record of close to $5 billion. So this is really a record for the Asian Development Bank in recognition of the need that, especially in a post-pandemic period and the poly crisis that we are currently kind of living through, that the poorest and most vulnerable countries in our region need additional investments. But when we talk about investments, it is about financial resources, but it's also about technical assistance and partnerships. Because to be really clear how NDBs work with our clients, whether on the public and private sector side, it's partnerships. It's never top down. It's always about coordination, listening, understanding what the development needs are, and identifying kind of how we can bring some knowledge from other countries in the region or beyond to really try to provide some solutions. So the ADF 13, which was agreed in 2019, has a focus area on the Sustainable Development Goal 5 on gender equality. This was the first time we'd ever done this in this cycle, and it complements our current strategy 2030, which Samantha talked about this morning, where last year we had these targets. Samantha mentioned 75%. Now all of ADB projects investments have at least one gender indicator. And from next year, that will still be the case, but then we'll have at least 50+ percentage of all our operations that are gender focused. So all of them will have a gender indicator, and then we're going to focus even more and setting targets on that. It's all about challenging ourselves, as we mentioned earlier. So the ADF is part of that overall mix of ways that we invest. So we've talked about gender mainstreaming, we've talked about different types of indicators. Here it's about the gender transformative agenda and how we can advance that. So especially in recognition of the role of social norms. So this is very much a contribution to SDG 5, which, as we know in this region, is, well, progress is not really being as advanced as we would like, and we only have 4 years left. So in 2019, the donors agreed to this 20% earmarking of funds. And in ADF 14, again, thank you to Japan and other donors of the region, including Australia, for saying that this remained a priority for them and setting 20%. As the region's climate bank, we also have set aside 50% so that's about $500 million to climate adaptation. And this is just grants. So this is in addition to the other climate investments that we do in the region. So we have allocated in the cycle that's just finished close to $160 million. And these are the kind of areas that we wanted to focus on that go beyond gender mainstreaming and are really kind of correspond with the SDG 5 kind of core areas. And again, as ADB has been a climate bank and has a very strong infrastructure kind of investment portfolio, it hasn't always been straightforward when we discuss with our clients on how to talk about GBV. How do we address these different gender constraints? So the grants kind of allow us a new kind of pipeline of projects in very hard sectors, because grants mean they don't have to return the funds. So it means a space for innovation and kind of feeling comfortable in a space that is uncomfortable, frankly, for a lot of our non-gender ministries that we work with as MDBs. So as you can see, this is very small, but we might share this slide afterwards. We work across all the sectors. So that that donut over there represents, with all the acronyms that ADB really loves to use, all of the sectors we have been able to kind of integrate these type of grants. And these are the different countries. Again, a strong focus on the Pacific, FCAS and SIDS, as well as other kind of group, what we call our Group A, and a certain threshold for Group B countries. So here's a chance to kind of think about how we've tried to do this over the last cycle and now looking forward. So this is a project from the Solomon Islands in our education sector. So we've always been very strong in gender mainstreaming. It's a very low-hanging fruit, sometimes we say in NDBs, the education sector. But there is so many areas that we wanted to go even further, and this is what the ADF is enabling us to do. So we are building dormitories in outer islands of the Solomon Islands. We are also looking at how do we support adolescent girls who have fallen pregnant to return to school. So this is a real taboo topic in this context, very difficult, and most girls who do fall pregnant don't return to school. And so we have this huge challenge of how do we want to encourage more women to go into the labor market if that's their choice, but there isn't much avenue for them. And even being able to discuss these types of issues is very complicated. So we're looking at, it's a very comprehensive approach where we look at curriculum reform. How do we start talking about sexual and reproductive health and rights, not only to girls, also to adolescent boys? So that social norm approach is very much integrated in that. And so we're very used to seeing a lot of female teachers in secondary school, but not many that go up to principals. So we are also supporting kind of a management kind of leadership program for those female teachers to go to the next level. The design for the schools also is, especially in the context of the Pacific, as Samantha mentioned in the first session, it is one of the most disaster-prone regions globally. So we are really looking at how to make the infrastructure climate resilient. In Tajikistan, so going from the Pacific to our Central West Asia, so agriculture in Tajikistan is highly feminized because of out-migration, male out-migration to neighboring countries. So a lot of women working, but not a lot of women who have the decision-making over their household income. There are still male relatives who may have a say on that. Even when we try to set targets, for example, for women to take part in agricultural kind of groups, like community-based groups, we are told we can't do that because the membership is based on land ownership. What do? Women don't have the land title. So there's a lot of ways that we need to kind of shift those norms and be creative. So the grant is allowing us to do that by finding different ways of empowering women. So ADB's kind of projects, and possibly similar to the IFC and the World Bank, we kind of look at outputs and outcomes. We have a log frame. So ADF projects have a set-alone component that is separate from the gender mainstreaming. So across this project, which is very much a gender-focused project, we have different gender mainstreaming to ensure that female-led farms are getting the resources, knowledge, and capacity to be able to to be climate resilient, which is a huge challenge in this part of the world. Looking at how do you support more women to access markets, to be part of the value chain. So that would be our gender mainstreaming that's paid for from the project or technical assistance. And then output 3 is really where we kind of added a whole GBV component. So in Dushanbe, there are 2 GBV shelters. And when I was looking at photos to use in this PowerPoint, I didn't want to use those photos because at the moment, they're not in a great state. So we are refurbishing them and looking at providing capacity building for service providers, because there's a lot of gaps in capacity on how to support survivors. And also, how do you support women to become economically independent once they leave the shelter? So giving them an avenue through microfinance grants. So a very recently approved project, and this is around gender-based violence, is in Cambodia. This is only around GBV. So this is, we don't have many projects like this in ADB, which are only about gender. Usually we have a lot of gender mainstream. This is really only about GBV. So this was approved just a month ago. And so it has 3 different components. All of them are supported by the Asian Development Fund. So one is about public financial management. How do we ensure that financial flows go to GBV? So how do we enhance that and put it in a systems approach? So it's really combining GBV with another acronym, Gender Responsive Budgeting, GRB. There's an existing law on GBV in Cambodia, but it has a couple of gaps. So we are working to update that to make it more comprehensive. Output 2 is looking at how do we increase kind of how many shelters there are, so that this map shows where the interventions will take place. So we are upgrading existing shelters. We are also giving training again to service providers on how to provide quality care to survivors. And then on the third one is kind of bringing in another aspect of ADB's kind of focus areas under our 2025 to 2030 strategy is around how do we leverage digital solutions? So looking at how we can do that through a chat bot for survivors so that we can have more immediate access to information and data and access to service information. And again, focusing on that social norms approach, also looking at how do we integrate this into education curriculum through the school system. So there is a lot more stories about this. I'm not going to go through all of them in the interest of time. This is the faces of some of the women who have benefited from the Asian Development Fund. You can find some of these stories on our 2 websites that are here, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Keiko. Donna, thank you. I mean, definitely that grant window has made a huge difference for us in terms of being able to push some of these issues. We wish we had one that could apply to all our countries, but unfortunately this is only the ones that are at the low income level. So moving on now to Mari. Mari is from JICA. She's a senior advisor in gender development with many years. She's been with working on JICA projects since 2010, I believe, including in Nicaragua and Pakistan. And she's going to share with us some of the special focus on gender-based violence. Thank you, Mari.
Thank you for having me to talk about JICA's approaches to addressing gender-based violence. I'm waiting for the slides. Thank you. Okay, so firstly, let me touch upon JICA's policy on gender equality and women's empowerment. Gender equality is closely linked to our organization's mission. The concept of human security is the underlying principle for all of JICA's cooperation, and it is about the rights to live in dignity, being free from fear and want. So it's also a justification for our work on gender-based violence. In 2021, JICA has formulated strategies for 20 development issues called JICA Global Agenda, and there's one for gender equality and women's empowerment. It aims to create a gender equal and fair society where everyone can fulfill their potential. The strategy adopts a gender transformative approach with focus on changing structure and relations and strengthening agency of women and girls. There are 5 priority areas for gender mainstreaming, which are women's economic empowerment, women's peace and security, women's education and lifetime health, gender equal governance, and gender responsive infrastructure. In addition to these, we have identified 2 new thematic areas to focus, which are promotion of gender smart business and elimination of sexual gender-based violence. And as this slide shows, these 2 themes are addressed not as an independent area or issue, but across the 5 priority areas. And we are doing so both through projects which purpose is directly related with elimination of GBV, and also mainstreaming GBV responsive activities in the projects which has different purposes. So as we already know, gender-based violence is one of the most extreme manifestations of gender inequality and so prevalent worldwide. And according to our analysis, there are 2 root causes which force women and girls' silence, which are norms on acceptance of GBV in the societies which is sustained by gender inequality, and also insufficiency of appropriate support service for gender-based violence survivors. So in response to these assumptions, our work on GBB is mainly based on two approaches. First, promoting communities, institutions, and societies that do not tolerate GBB through, for example, raising awareness, challenging discriminatory and harmful social norms, increasing advocates, supporters, etc. And secondly, strengthening support system and services for GBB survivors in terms of relief, protection, rehabilitation, economic empowerment, social reintegration, and always based on the guiding principle of survivor-centered approach. And for both approaches, we think partnership with multiple stakeholders is an important key. So let me share some project examples addressing GBB. We have been implementing anti-human trafficking projects in Mekong region since 2009. The first project started in Thailand and later spread to Vietnam, Myanmar, and Cambodia. Each one has actually different background and activities, but commonly focused on prevention of trafficking in persons and protection and social reintegration of persons who are trafficked. And we work on these two, prevention and protection, through strengthening capacity of multidisciplinary team, which includes police, people from judiciary, social workers, for example, and the mechanism to provide survivor-centered services, such as establishment of hotlines and training for people who receive calls. So human trafficking is an issue which cannot be resolved by a single country. Rather, it requires effective collaboration among countries in a region. So we have held regional workshop in Thailand every year since 2009, and also training in Japan, inviting participants from ASEAN countries since 2012. Through these initiatives, regional human resource network has been created, facilitating mutual understanding and possible cooperation. So now let me introduce another initiative addressing GBV in Punjab province, Pakistan. GBV is prevalent in the country. And this project aims to strengthen the provincial support mechanism for GBV survivors. And we were working with Social Welfare Department of the Government of Punjab, which runs public shelters and crisis centers, providing with legal aid, counseling services, referral to other facilities. So the project supported the department by providing service providers who work for those facilities with different sorts of training, with the key principle of promoting survivor-centered approach. And we also conducted awareness raising and outreach activities with the support of the network of lady health workers. One of the pilot activities is about transitional home. We set up this kind of home where GBV survivors who do not have anywhere to go after leaving temporary shelter can live in safety and dignity, and receiving support for socioeconomic rehabilitation, skill training, and job placement. The partnership with local private sector is very important in this model. And the journey has just begun, but we are gradually witnessing successful examples of women who become economically independent. And we continue to invest in the efforts to scale up and contribute to the GBV survivors' empowerment and elimination of GBV. And this is actually from a GBV project in Kenya, and I'm sorry that it is not from Asia and the Pacific region. But let me share this project's unique approaches to address gender-based violence, such as organizing a business marathon for innovative business ideas to combat gender-based violence, and also providing solar lanterns with the support of Panasonic as a pilot activity to see how these lights are effective to strengthen women's agency and mitigate GBV in the village. So, sorry, I'm running late. I have 3 messages to convey at last, maybe. GBV is a hidden factor of many women and girls in the region, which hinder their full participation in economy and society. So we need a greater attention to gender discriminatory system and practices and more investment to change them. And empowering women and girls in our region so that we can live in full potential must be at the forefront of our collective agenda. That's all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mara. That was really interesting. I mean, I wasn't familiar with any of those examples, so really interesting, and I can already see where we should probably be talking a bit more at country level on how we can potentially collaborate. Okay, we're now going to turn to our online panelists, starting with Hillary. Hillary, I hope you're with us, and we can pull you up on the big screen. Hillary is an economist at the World Bank, where she leads the East Asian Pacific Gender Innovation Lab. Oh no, that's the wrong person. The other person.
That's correct.
Liz.
That's me. Oh, okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay, there you are. She's a microeconomist with 13 years of experience designing and implementing cutting-edge research on gender, which has also been published. I'll hand the floor over to you, the virtual floor to you, Hillary.
Excellent. And I understand my slides will be displayed. Perfect. So I will be talking today about evidence-based solutions. So something that Hannah talked before about the role of evidence in the new World Bank Group gender strategy in guiding what we do and also in helping us identify what should be scaled. And today I'll be focusing on the topic of enabling women's economic opportunities. Please go to the next slide. So why think about this? Women have lower levels of labor force participation than men everywhere in the region. However, this is not unique to East Asia and the Pacific, as we can see on the left-hand side. Not only are women participating in the labor market at lower levels than men, they're also earning less than men with similar education levels, where after accounting for women's education levels, the gender wage gap ranges from about 10 to 20% in different countries in the region. Next slide, please. We also know that gender gaps in entrepreneurship depend on the business size. EAP Guild did a study looking at female entrepreneurship in Southeast Asia, and we found that women are less likely to own SMEs than men, and women's micro businesses have lower profits than men who operate in similar sectors of activities. These gaps are linked with women's lower levels of input, such as capital, hired labor, time for their own labor, their skills, and all of these are shaped by preferences and constraints driven by market failures, gender norms, and institutions. Next slide, please. The New World Bank Group strategy highlights a number of evidence-based recommendations drawing on the briefing notes that were done in preparation for that, as well as the causal evidence series put together by the Gender Innovation Labs at the World Bank. And there's a number of things that can be done to enable women's economic opportunities. And there's a need for a multifaceted approach. There's a need to address constraints related to women's role in domestic work, as we've heard from a number of the speakers here today, thinking about access to affordable, quality childcare, addressing norms about care work, and engaging men and boys in these efforts, but also thinking about making sure that the transport infrastructure meets women's needs and that access to energy, water, sanitation, and healthcare infrastructure can also link to alleviating some of these time constraints. In addition, it's important to be thinking about skills development, and this takes a range of different, this looks like a range of different things. On the one hand, it's important to be thinking about developing skills for the future, such as digital or green jobs. But it's also critical to be thinking about building entrepreneurship skills, socio-emotional skills, and to have programs that tailor agricultural extension services to women's needs and also address sectoral segregation and technical and vocational education and training programs. There's a need to support women's access to capital, as we know that women have access to less credit and capital constraints affect gender gaps in entrepreneurship. There's a number of different solutions that the other regional guilds have been piloting, looking at psychometrics and cash flow loans as options for helping to boost access to credit for certain individuals, as well as evidence from our lab looking at public financing schemes. And IFC at the World Bank also has vast experience working with blended finance. It's also important to enable women's control and ownership of assets, including land, but also on other fronts. And the World Bank Group Women, Business, and the Law report shows that globally women have less than 2/3 the rights of men. And it shows that the importance of alleviating these restrictive laws and regulations for promoting women's economic opportunities. Finally, as we've heard from a number of speakers, there's a critical need to address gender-based violence. Next slide, please. I'll delve now into just one topic, which came up in the previous session as well, and that is the critical role of childcare. Next slide, please. We know that care affects women's work choices and earnings in a number of ways. The motherhood penalty is well established in the literature, and work done by the social sustainability and inclusion teams in Indonesia and the Philippines show the critical role that care burdens play in the low female labor force participation in these countries. Also, we know from EAP Gill's work that in low and middle income countries, 21 out of 22 studies showed that child care availability has positive impacts on women's work. In addition to affecting whether women work, it also affects the type of work they do. Our evidence from Vietnam shows that care responsibilities can affect the types of occupations that women work in, and that contributes to gender wage gaps. Our evidence also shows that women with care responsibilities tend to sort into micro businesses or unpaid family work, and they have lower profits in their micro businesses due to their care responsibilities. Studies from IFC show that child care responsibilities can lead to employees quitting, being absent, or having lower productivity. For example, in Papua New Guinea, 20% of employees with children had less previous jobs due to childcare. And there were about 14 missed work days per employee every year, affecting the wage bill by about 5%. This, of course, has broader implications for productivity and growth. And we can move to the next slide in the interest of time. So what are some of the things that we're doing about this? I'll give a couple of examples. In Cambodia, a study that EAP Guild did jointly with our social sustainability and inclusion colleagues found that the childcare supply in Cambodia is extremely low. And this comes from a lack of funding for early childhood education, as well as weak enforcement of existing laws. But there are also demand side constraints. Households have fairly low demand for childcare, mainly due to the lack of familiarity with center-based care and lack of trust issues. With the support of the Japanese government, we've been working with an NGO on a community-based childcare pilot for garment factory workers. And we're also supporting the development of a sub-decree that will clarify the institutional framework for childcare provision, improve the regulatory environment, and help define what quality standards a childcare center must meet. In Indonesia, our colleagues in the social sustainability and inclusion practice recently completed a study where it also showed that demand for childcare was low due to social norms in part, but also because current childcare options don't meet women's needs. And it recommended a number of improvements, such as longer service hours, culturally sensitive pedagogy, and making services more affordable. We're currently working with that team with the support of the Japanese government to partner with a women's NGO, and we're piloting community-based childcare centers that would meet parents' needs, and also the intervention streamlines behavioral change components to address social norms and boost demand for childcare. Our colleagues in IFC are also working in Indonesia to support the private sector to better understand how care responsibilities are affecting their workforce and to help develop solutions. As we know that the public sector cannot solve the issue on its own, IFC is doing these market studies not only in Indonesia, but in several other countries in the region, including Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Sri Lanka. I will conclude here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hillary. Big applause for you in the room. No, thank you very much for, again, emphasizing, the need to go deeper with real evidence and some good examples from the region. So moving to our last speaker. Liz, are you with us? You're going to get I believe. Yes, hi. Okay, so by way of introduction, Liz, or Elizabeth Cowan, is the Senior Specialist Advisor for Gender Equality at the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. She's the Director of the Gender Equality, Disability and Social Inclusion, or GEDSI, Performance and Effectiveness section, which leads the integration of gender equality and disability equity across DPAS development and humanitarian assistance. And she's going to tell us about how they do all of this. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam. I am guessing my slides are coming up.
I think so. They're on the way, yes.
All right, so I will try to keep this pretty short. I know that you're running over time, and I'm sure everyone is getting tired. So first, greetings from Canberra. I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking a little bit about our new international development policy as it relates to gender equality, disability equity, and I'm going to touch on climate change, but that's not going to be a very strong focus of my presentation. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what we've committed to in that policy and how we're progressing in terms of implementation. So if we move on to the next slide. So our new international development policy was released last year. It's about 1 year old. And it contained a couple of policy commitments relating to gender equality that are really quite seismic. These are some pretty major policy reforms that were introduced. So the first one is a requirement that all of our aid investments valued at 3 million and above include gender equality objectives. So some countries have targets for their ODA. For example, targets that maybe 80% of their development programs are tagged as having a focus on gender equality. We've taken a different approach, and what we've done is require that almost all of our ODA investments across all sectors include gender equality objectives, which is essentially a 100% target. We've been implementing that for almost 2 years, and I'm happy to share with you that the next time we report on this publicly in early 2025, we'll be reporting that we have achieved compliance with this new requirement. So we're really proud of our achievement here. Our policy also introduced or reintroduced a performance target. So this is a target that 80% of our development investments effectively address gender equality in implementation. And again, this applies across our whole aid program and across all sectors. So what this is saying is that it doesn't matter if we're working on infrastructure or policy reform or governance, we expect all of these programs to be adequately addressing gender equality in their implementation. And this year, we achieved 79% against that 80% target, and I'm hoping that next year we'll get to 80%. Our development policy also introduced a new requirement in regards to climate change. And so it's similar to our gender objective requirement, but it's aiming for 50% of our new development investments to include climate change objectives, increasing to 80% by 2028 to 2029. So again, this applies across the aid program and is a really strong indicator that we're expecting all of our development investments across all sectors to be addressing the impacts of climate change. And then our international development policy is implemented through country-level development partnership plans. So these are the plans that are agreed with bilateral government counterparts. They're developed in consultation with various development partners. And they essentially say that what the objectives and outcomes are at the country level in alignment with our development policy. And for the first time ever, we have required that all of those development partnership plans are informed by analysis of gender equality, disability equity, and social inclusion, or what we call in Australia, GEDSI. All right, next slide, please. The development strategy also announced that we'd be developing a couple of new strategies, one on disability equity and rights, and one on gender equality. It didn't announce the development of the new LGBTQIA+ human rights engagement strategy, but we're developing one of those as well. So we've been quite busy with strategy development since the development policy was released. So on disability equity and rights, this will be our third strategy focused on disability equity, and it's actually a step change from our historical approach, which was focused on disability inclusion. The gender equality strategy will be replacing our current one, which dates to 2016. And the LGBTQIA+ human rights engagement strategy will be our first ever international strategy focusing on LGBTQIA+ rights. And I think what the development of these three strategies is signalling is that Australia is really leaning into an intersectional approach. Our priorities, we're shifting from a focus on gender equality to broaden out and look at these other priority population groups, but also how they intersect. Next slide. So far, our focus has really been on the intersection of gender equality and disability equity. And in particular, in the past year or so, we've made some major structural changes to support a more joined-up approach to disability and gender equality. What we hear a lot in DFAT is that our approach to disability equity is kind of maybe 10 years behind where we're at for gender equality. So what we've been aiming to do very intentionally is use the policy mandate that we have for gender equality, those really strong commitments and targets, to also create more space for more attention to disability equity in our programming. And to achieve that, we've integrated the team focused on gender equality and disability equity in terms of how it's mainstreamed through the aid program. So my team, which was previously focused just on gender equality, now looks after disability equity. In 2023, we introduced this new guidance, which you can see on the screen there, which is a good practice note on gender equality, disability, and social inclusion analysis. And so what this is essentially saying is that rather than just doing gender analysis for our investments, it's important to explore impacts on these other population groups and design investments to ensure they benefit. We've been taking a joined up approach to our technical assistance on gender equality and disability equity, including coordination between the teams that lead on the two, so that if a DFAT officer approaches us asking for gender equality advice, we also offer them disability equity advice. And that's really just to kind of use that lever that we have for gender equality to enhance the focus on disability equity. We're also integrating our capability development. So we've updated training resources for when we visit our international missions, so that we're providing gender equality and disability equity training together. And we are screening all of our development investments against the OECD DAC disability and gender equality policy markers. And some analysis that will be released soon shows that we are one of the top ranking donors that are addressing gender equality and disability equity at the same time. I will note, though, that our colleagues from Japan are actually above us in that ranking. So I think we also have something to learn from you, and I'd love to share with you further in the future. All right, on to the next slide. I mentioned earlier our development partnership plans, and the point that I would like to make here is that this is a really good example of how effectively we're using the policy mandate that we have for gender equality to increase attention to disability equity at DFAT. So we had a requirement that these new development partnership plans are required to include at least one objective or outcome focused on gender equality, and that they need to be informed by this GEDSI analysis. Now, what we found with the development of these development partnership plans is that even though the requirement is for a gender equality objective or outcome, because through the analysis we have, I guess, inspired, provided a mechanism for teams to think about disability when they might not have otherwise, what we're actually seeing in the development partnership plans that are being finalised, 3 of which are on the screen there, is that they're actually including objectives or outcomes that are focused on gender equality and disability equity. So they're increasing that focus on disability equity, even though they didn't have to, even though they weren't required to do so. So that's a really positive progression that we're seeing there. And then we'll go on to the next slide, which will be my final slide, which is really just to share with you a little bit of what we're doing next, where we're heading. So the disability strategy will be released very, very soon. International Day of People with Disabilities is coming up, so you might see something announced around that date. We're also going to be releasing a new exciting resource, which is a handbook on how to develop gender and climate outcomes across development sectors. I'm going to be sharing this widely, so hopefully it will reach many of you. And this is essentially a resource to help DFAT and our development partners meet those dual requirements for gender and climate outcomes across all of our sectoral investments. But I hope it will be useful for other development partners as well. We're developing a new support unit on GEDSI to hardwire this kind of joined up approach that we're taking to gender equality and disability equity by bringing them together, and also increasing focus on LGBTQIA+, and First Nations Australians engagement, which is another priority for the Australian government. And throughout all of this, we're really deepening and strengthening our GEDSI practice. So continuing to learn more about good practice approaches to gender equality and disability equity, as well as LGBTQIA+ and other social inclusion considerations as well, but also learning more about how to most effectively address these together in an intersectional way. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Big applause. Big applause for you, Celeste. Thank you so much. I mean, I think from the outside, as observers, we find all these developments really, really exciting. Australia's been always an important partner for ADB, and it's really helpful for us to have a counterpart which also has these strong commitments coming from inside as well. So we really appreciate that. And it was really great to see how you're tackling the gender disability piece, increasing together. That is also an emerging area for ADB. We don't have it quite structured the same way, but we did publish a gender and disability guideline last year. And for people that are interested, there are some flyers at the back with the QR code. So we are very much running out of time. And I know the MC is giving me the look, but just I wanted to say, please join me in thanking. I think we've had a really interesting panel here where we've sort of highlighted some really key points around the importance for intentionally having innovative financing windows to address areas of SDG 5. We talked about the need to innovate in areas such as GBV and how that can be done bilaterally. We heard from Hillary about the need for evidence, using childcare as an example, and then with Liz bringing all this together through a new bilateral strategy and bringing together the different axes of intersectionality. So with that, thank you very much to the panelists, and back to our MC.
Thank you very much, Tamara-san. Okay, so we have two speakers giving us the closing remarks to wrap up the great conversation that we had today. First, we have Sachiko Imoto, Senior Vice President of the Japan International Cooperation Agency. Imoto-san, please.
Dear participants and speakers, it's a great honor for me to deliver closing remarks for this important forum, which aims to promote gender equality through the collaboration of diverse stakeholders. I would like to thank everyone who participated in this forum, and especially my sincere gratitude goes to the speakers who shared us very interesting and encouraging initiatives from our partner countries, the strategies from our partner organizations, and very inspirational stories from the private sector in Japan and India. The underlying principle for JICA's cooperation is realizing human security, which is the rights of all the individuals to live in dignity, free from fear and want. To realize human security, it is essential to protect the lives, human rights, and dignity of women and girls through the promotion of gender equality and women's empowerment, and to promote the creation of a society in which each can exercise their inherent capabilities. With this in mind, JICA has continuously engaged itself with protecting and empowering women and girls. The projects Ms. Usami introduced are the examples of JICA's work in facilitating survivor-centric support services for human trafficking and gender-based violence survivors. In South Sudan, the similar project aimed to bring a gender transformative change and supported gender-based violence survivors to acquire driving skills, to work as drivers, which has traditionally been considered a male occupation. As a result, some survivors succeeded in becoming professional drivers, with their income increasing 15-fold. In terms of women's economic empowerment, the approach adopted in JICA's agriculture project is worth mentioning. It is named Smallholder Holistic Horticulture Empowerment Promotion, which is called SHEP approach, and it has been implemented in rural areas of 60 countries. The unique characteristics of SHEP is that gender sensitization training is an indispensable part of the approach to increasing the productivity of small-scale farmers. Couples of small-scale farmers participate in gender training as a part of the curriculum, which makes men recognize women as equal partners in managing the farm and household economy, and leads to joint decision-making by the couple in farm management. In various studies, we observed that household income increases with this approach, and joint decision-making especially strongly enhances household food security. This is an excellent example of gender transformative change contributing to increased productivity. And in all work, partnership is the key. JICA is collaborating with various partners, including the World Bank, ADB, and other UN organizations in various activities, including gender-based violence. The promotion of gender-smart business focuses on enterprises and businesses in the context of women's economic empowerment and works to increase the number of enterprises in developing countries engaged in gender equal initiatives. JICA supports the activities of such enterprises through human resource development and the establishment of government policy and institutions aiming at the transformation to a gender equal economic system. In addition, through our private sector lending arm, we are actively providing finance to female entrepreneurs, especially small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, together with the World Bank Group and ADB. As for the collaboration in the field, we have co-financed other many projects, and we need to expand such collaboration to promote gender equality, and acceleration and scaling up are necessary. I would also like to emphasize that emergencies such as conflicts and disasters often reveal social distortions and expose invisible inequalities and discrimination in peacetime. The risks for women and girls that become apparent in times of crisis stem from the fixed gender roles and unequal gender relations that exist in regular times. Therefore, it is always essential to promote gender equality, including women's participation in decision-making and leaderships, and especially in the region, Asia and Pacific, such support to foster the women's leadership is quite necessary because the region is quite prone to natural disasters. It is said that it will take more than 100 years, according to the numbers as the statistics we see, but at least more than 100 years to achieve gender equality globally at the current pace. And we cannot wait so long in this increasingly unstable world. We need to accelerate initiatives for gender equality to create more resilient societies. We have talked long about the importance of gender equality. We have accumulated evidences, and now we need to prove our commitment by actions. JICA will continue to strengthen its partnership with partner countries, multilateral organizations, civil society, and private sector stakeholders for this goal. In light of this, today's seminar proved to be a valuable opportunity. On behalf of all of us here today, I would like to express my great appreciation again to the World Bank, the ASEAN Development Bank, and the Ministry of Finance for organizing this seminar, and to all the excellent speakers and participants, all of you, for being here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Imoto-san. So last speaker this morning is going to be Mr. Tadashi Yokoyama, the director of the Tokyo office of the International Finance Corporation, giving us a final remarks. Yokoyama-san, please.
Thank you, Koichi-san. I'm glad to make a final speech after Sachiko-san. We are JICA board members until last year. Okay. Distinguished guests and speakers, valued colleagues and partners, it has been my great privilege to be with you today. I would like to thank all of you for your contributions and participation in the rich conversations. I would also like to convey my deep appreciation to the teams of JMOF, ADB, JICA, as well as World Bank and IFC for preparing this important event. 60% of the world's population resides in Asia and the Pacific. This region continues to be the engine of the world economic growth. However, we are still facing sizable developmental challenges, such as climate change, inclusive growth, and poverty reduction, among others, gender issues. Having said this, in concluding today's event, I feel enormous optimism that impactful solutions to these challenges lie in advancing gender equality. Today, we have been enthusiastic to share knowledge and experiences, the good practices as well as the insights which can help us to overcome the challenges. Continuing our efforts in this respect is the key. We need to more collaboration and partnership towards gender equality. MDBs and development institutions need to continue to play an important role based upon data and evidence, as Samantha and Hannah spoke today. Encouraging challenges as well as remaining challenges were explained. So encouraging the progress and as well as remaining challenges were explained by Shivani, Mika, Sarah. Innovation is a multiplier for change, taking investments and supercharging their impact by increasing the diversity and then seeking trickle-down effect to influence meaningful change. As a session, Rachel, Mariki, and Chieko touched, I would like to mention gender and climate. For World Bank Group, these two themes cut across everything we do. We are proactively designing solutions that address this intersection, including here in Asia. We have recently launched the She Wins Climate Initiative to support women climate entrepreneurs to grow and access private sector financing. This consideration is all top of our mind at IFC and the World Bank as we develop and implement the World Bank Group's Gender Strategy 2024-2030. IFC is leading the way in private sector with gender lens investments and demonstrating our commitment to this cause. The strategy is dedicated to expanding women's participation in the global economy. Our recent World Bank IMF annual meetings last month were a historical moment for us and showcased how gender equality is being integrated across all our operations. During the annual meetings, the enthusiastic and ambitious leadership conversation took place. The Japan delegation played a significant role. Also, the goodwill between the public and the private sector were confirmed to deliver gender equality outcomes. A sense of urgency and appetite for innovation solutions was shared as well. Government of Japan continues to fund innovative gender inclusive solutions across geographies. Here, I will talk briefly about the Japan Comprehensive Japan Trust Fund, we call CJTF, which is funded by Japan and managed by IFC. This CJTF supports a wide variety of advisory projects across sectors, geographies, and strategic objectives. This trust fund integrates gender equality into infrastructure projects, driving economic growth and reducing poverty. Hydropower project in Nepal, which includes significant gender components, scaling up enterprise financing for women in India, and the Armenia Women Entrepreneurship Advisory Project are some examples. We look forward to collaborating more with the Japanese government. to attain gender equality in our operations. World Bank Group, as a truly global development institution, we continue to look for innovative ways and solutions with our partners to address gender inequality around the world, and bring in this region and bring out from this region those ways and solutions. Systemic and sustainable change towards gender equality theory drives economic growth and makes significant strides in reducing poverty. Gender equality creates thriving firms, flourishing societies, and prosperous economies, as former speakers mentioned. Women in this region make up more than half of the population. That means about 1/3 of the world population. Therefore, accelerating progress in gender equality in the region is critical to achieve a prosperous, inclusive, resilient, sustainable growth forward. Last of all, I'd like to deeply appreciate again all people involved in today's successful event and heartily wish to collaborate more and seek synergy to bring more impacts in gender equality with all partners. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So please give me additional 30 seconds to thank our interpreters who actually are remotely interpreting, not there. Adachi-san and Morioka-san, thank you very much. And also our technical team, Chiari-san, Badan-san from the World Bank, and also Morofi-san from EAS, who actually basically delivered this event. Thank you very much. And also, they are not here in the room, but Yoshiko-san, Chie-san, Sachi-san from the World Bank, Yukari-san, Yasue-san, Yu-san from the IFC, basically taking care of the reception, room setting, etc. Thank you very much. And thank you. Now, this is the time for me to take a risk because I may miss some names. But from the World Bank, Lola, Liz, Tijan, Sei, Chiara, Junya, Paul from the team in Washington, Mika, Makino-san, Shibata-san from the ADB side, Aya-san from the Japanese ED's office in the World Bank, and of course, the colleagues in the room from the World Bank and the ADB who basically constantly having the discussion virtually across the ocean. And I was the one actually last minute coming in and starting last week. But I know in the last few minutes you had the seamlessly conversation to make this happen. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.